Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Moses Kemibaro, as mentioned, founder and CEO of .savvy. Shito forgot to mention I'm also an avid fan of Arsenal. And the way things are going, we hope we're not going to go the way of Manchester United, but anything is possible. So it's a pleasure to moderate this panel, which is exciting, and we have a very distinguished panel that's really going to help us celebrate Adili Group's cyber training arena, the first advanced cybersecurity training facility, not just in East Africa, but in the entire continent of Africa. To set the scene, I'd really like us to kind of look and see that as we move forward with digital transformation across the continent, cyber threats are both growing in number and becoming more complex. Just to give you some of the numbers, cyber attacks globally surged by 38% in 2023, affecting multiple sectors, according to Checkpoint Research. The projected annual cybercrime costs are expected to hit 10.5 trillion by 2025, according to Cybersecurity Ventures. And last year alone, 61% of organizations experienced at least one cyber attack, according to IBM. In Africa, the situation even looks worse because cyber attacks are projected to increase by 300%, and especially impacting finance and healthcare. It's great that we have some people from the financial services sector also to discuss this with us on the panel. Economic losses from cybercrime on the continent now exceed 4 billion per year, according to Serianu, and only 36% of African nations have a national cybersecurity strategy in place, according to ITU. In East Africa and Kenya saw a rise of 50% in cyber attacks in 2023, affecting key sectors such as finance, healthcare, and government. Also, cyber losses reached over 10 billion shillings, and the region faces a significant skills gap with 25,000 cybersecurity roles currently unfilled. In addition to these figures, as we mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence is now transforming both cyber threats and defenses, while attackers use AI to scale and automate their attacks, making them harder to detect. Also, AI-driven defense tools are equally powerful, enabling rapid detection, pattern recognition, and also predictive responses. So today we're going to explore all these challenges and opportunities together. Adili's cyber training arena is designed to equip professionals like yourselves with the skills needed to navigate this complex landscape and also leverage AI effectively in cybersecurity. I'm joined by a distinguished group of panelists today who I'll invite to join us here on the stage, each bringing a valuable expertise from their respective fields. Please join me in welcoming them. Rosa Nduati-Mutero, the managing partner at ALN Kenya and Jawala Kana. Rosa is a leading corporate lawyer specializing in corporate governance, M&A, regulatory compliance. She's also recognized among Kenya's top women in business under 40, and Rosa's insights will highlight the governance and legal implications of cybersecurity. Welcome, Rosa. We also have joining us Ofir Hason, the CEO of CyberGym. Ofir brings 20 years of cybersecurity expertise, including roles in Israel's National Information Security Authority and IDF's Elite Unit 8200. As CEO of CyberGym, he leads global initiatives in secure critical infrastructure with a focus on advanced simulation training and also international partnerships. Welcome, Ofir. Join us on the stage, please. We also have Esther Masese Waititu, the Chief Financial Services Officer at Safaricom. Esther's extensive experience in banking, financial, digital finance, and corporate strategy across East Africa equips her to discuss the balance of security and innovation in digital financial services. Welcome, Esther. Then we have Njeri Jomo, the CEO and Principal Officer, Jubilee Health Insurance. Njeri is an award-winning leader with over 20 years' experience in financial services. She's also recognized for strategic leadership and transformative impact in the insurance sector. She has been key to making Jubilee Health Insurance the region's leading health insurer and also leverages cybersecurity initiatives. Welcome, Njeri. And lastly, we have Jolene Kirui, the Senior Cloud Security Advocate at Microsoft. Jolene is an InfoSec evangelist with extensive experience in app security testing, DevSecOps, and GSM security. She's also been recognized as a top 50 woman in Cybersecurity Africa finalist and is the co-author of DevSecOps for Azure. She advocates for best security practice on GitHub, Azure, and mentors the next generation of cybersecurity talent. Karibu sana, Jolene. So we'll get started with you, Rosa. Welcome. Rosa, as cybersecurity risks continue to grow, how do you see corporate governance evolving to address these challenges, and particularly in African cross-border operations? Also, what are the regulatory considerations?
Thank you, Moses, and karibuni nyumbani, everybody. It's a real pleasure to see all of you and also to be in this distinguished panel. I guess Moses, to answer that question, we have to remind ourselves what governance does. Governance really just sets the framework through which any organization creates its strategy, implements it, and monitors it. And so, in the context of cybersecurity, I'm sure we took a poll here this evening and asked how many people are staying awake because of cybersecurity risks. I'm actually one of them. As a managing partner, it's a key risk that I think about. And so, what governance does the key role of ensuring that the matter is not only addressed through a strategy of each company or each organization, and then there is a process through which it is cascaded down from strategy, from business owners through to board members, leadership, management, and down to every employee. So in that way, there are three key areas through which governance needs to operate. So one, the leadership. So business owners, whether it's shareholders, entrepreneur, whatever shape or form it takes, and then that cascades to the board, which we often say the visuals from the head. And what that means is that if the head does not know it, you can't expect the rest of the body to know what it's doing. And then we have a context of governance in terms of what policies and processes are in place to make sure that the organization is actually walking the talk. So the board could do what it wants to do or think that it has set strategy, but if it's not permeating down through the policies, procedures, practices, value systems, then it will actually work. So it's very important then that for cybersecurity risk, through the governance structures, employees and everybody, stakeholders operating within that business environment are very aware about cybersecurity risks and are doing everything they need to do in terms of compliance. I will answer the regulatory question, maybe in brief, because perhaps if I talk too much, it might be the whole day.
No problem. So I'll come now to Ofir. Critical infrastructure is a primary target for cyber threats worldwide. What are some of the most pressing cybersecurity threats facing critical infrastructure in Africa today?
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me and having part of this panel and this event. To be honest, it's a long answer that I can give you for the whole evening, but just to give it as a nutshell, not to get you guys bored. In Africa, in critical infrastructure or the cybersecurity threats in Africa is more or less the same in any other places around the world, which the critical infrastructures are based on technology and based on international connectivity, either internally in the continent or in the organization, or interconnected to other places around the world. Critical infrastructures, at the end of the day, their essential purpose is to provide basic services to the people, to the nation, that they are serving, that they are implementing, that they are installing. Meaning that at the end of the day, if someone succeeds to attack those critical infrastructures, they will influence the basic services of the people, either electricity, water, telecommunication, oil and gas, whatever those services that they need to provide. So those cyber attacks that's being designed and being executed on those critical infrastructures, their main goal is to damage or to deny of service those services from the people. Meaning that it's not just, and I know that a lot of people are talking about ransomware attacks, services attacks, those kind of attacks. Those attacks are not very, I would say that they are not the high priority of critical infrastructure. In critical infrastructures and many utilities, the main goal of the cyber attacks is to destroy the infrastructures and to deny of those companies to provide their services, their basic services to the people. And that means that they are much more sophisticated and much more targeted to those critical infrastructures and the technologies that they are using. And that makes it even more difficult to protect. Everyone's talking about ransomware attacks, services attacks, and so on, which they have their own challenges how to protect against those attacks. But adding targeted attacks with, I would say, even more specific enemies or bad guys attacking those organizations, it even make it more difficult to protect. That means that technology is not enough. That means with all respect to policy and procedures and regulations, it's not enough. At the end of the day, you need to figure out a way how you combine forces with the regulators, with ministers, and different regulators that you need to have and you have to have in place together with the technology. But there is another pillar that you have to take into consideration, it's the people. And I'm traveling quite a lot around the world, and we are having those facilities in different places around the world. And this is the first one that has been mentioned a few times. The first one in Africa, which is something that we are quite excited about. But we see that the same issues, the same problems, the same vulnerabilities all around the world. People are starting to shift their resources and their efforts, not just to technologies, but also to the human factor, meaning that they need to make sure that the relevant skills and certified, qualified employees are in place with the relevant certifications and trainings that they need to do, like in any other aspects of their business. So I believe that the critical infrastructures, just to include the critical infrastructures in Africa, suffering from the same, more or less the same attacks that every other critical infrastructures around the world is suffering, which again, those critical infrastructures based on technologies, therefore they are much more vulnerable to other, to the same malwares, attacks, whatever you want to call it, and that makes their life much more difficult to protect. Those attacks will damage their services, their infrastructures, so the damage, the consequences of the attacks will be much more higher than just stealing data or encrypting a bunch of files, or which is important by itself, but it's not the main high priority attacks that we are seeing in Africa, and we'll see more and more in the next few years.
Right, thank you so much for that. Esther, how are you?
Very well, good to see you.
We keep meeting like this.
I tell you, when you're outside.
So first of all, congratulations on the stellar performance of your department or division within Safaricom last week. And of course, that brings us to the question. Yeah, how are you able to balance the innovation, the incredible innovation that we see around what you're doing at Safaricom with digital financial services, and more importantly, security, which is key? And how do you balance that, the security and also the innovation that you keep bringing to this particular aspect of the business?
Great, thank you very much, and good to see you all. Good evening, everyone. So I think the thing for us, and I lead the M-Pesa business here in Kenya, which is quite big. And if you think about the number of transactions or number of customers we have, there's still about 30 million customers transacting with us, on a daily basis. For us, security is paramount. You need to be able to protect your wealth. You need to be able to protect your resources that you have worked so hard to gain. The only way that we can do this in an era of safety is we start by our products being secure by design. So as we're thinking about new technologies, as we look at new use cases, how we can enable new products and solutions, we always start by saying, how do we ensure that no one loses money? How do we ensure that the project or product is absolutely safe? So cybersecurity is one of the key considerations in terms of how we think of designing a lot of our products, and we employ the best in class technology. So we have in Safaricom we work in an environment that we call agile ways of working, and so within our agile way of working we have different squads. We've got every single professional that you need to create a product, and within that, aside from thinking about the technical skills around product development, there's a huge piece there around technology and technology in terms of front-end engineering, back-end engineering, but more importantly, we have development, security engineering, as part of that setup. So they play a critical role in terms of ensuring that everything that we designed is actually done on that basis. The other thing that we then do is we do extensive monitoring of our products on our system. So the first thing when I got here today, through the SOC, which is where you actually check to see where all your cybersecurity attacks, what's happening in the universe. And that's one of the first places I went to see, because that's where I spend at least part of my day just looking and seeing what's going on in there. So you can see different attacks coming from different places. For example, in Kenya this year, it was mentioned earlier, we've seen the potential attacks rate of 16.5% from a cybersecurity point of view, which translates to about 1.1 billion attacks happening at any one time. So being aware and actually tracking and monitoring this is what keeps our ecosystem absolutely safe. So just being aware, being alert, making sure you know where these attacks are coming from. If there's anything that you hear within the ecosystem, and this is why the power of collaboration also with experts such as yourselves is really critical, so that we can then continuously exchange information and ideas. But I want to build on the last point that I'm going to make, which is, Rose, what you did say, which is governance. We invest heavily in the training and development of all our staff members and partners that we work with in terms of the importance of cybersecurity. The month of October was actually a cybersecurity month, and where we actually hosted all our key partners and stakeholders and thought professionals in the cybersecurity space to work with us. And by extension, what we have done is what we have been able to build and how we've been able to protect our customers' data. We're also able to extend this as a service to a lot of our partners and our customers.
Well, thank you so much, Esther. Njeri, how are you?
Very, very well.
Fantastic, I'm good. So cybersecurity is crucial for the insurance sector, particularly in protecting sensitive customer data. And I think that was in our discussion earlier today. How does Jubilee Health Insurance prioritize cybersecurity in light of expanding digital transformation, for which I believe you're one of the most progressive insurance companies in Kenya doing that? And also, what are the regulatory considerations? And possibly most intriguing, the fact that you do have a board for IT at Jubilee Health Insurance as well.
Thank you, Moses. I think it's not very often that you have insurance progressive in the safety technology. There's a clap for that. Insurance is usually seen as the school guys, finance guys. So
The cool kids.
the cool kids is the peptide technology in banks. So I think this talk goes back to what insurance. Insurance is actually risk transfer. We are discussing risk today because cyber is risk. So essentially risk is our business. But perhaps to respond to this question, it's going to go back a bit more into what we do on a day-to-day basis as a health insurer. So it's not just your typical risks, it's that you are collecting very sensitive health data on different kinds of people, up to and including government, and right to the point where it has quite a bit of interest in that if you have one leak as to what is this person suffering from, or what are you treating for, and you'll be surprised just how much level of interest there is in terms of trying to get that kind of information. And we have the great privilege of really just ensuring quite a number of people who inspire a lot of interest. And therefore, if I go back to the journey we began about 3 years ago as Jubilee Insurance or Jubilee Holdings as a group, we began a very aggressive digital transformation agenda, dubbed Changamka. Again, like a lot of other organizations, digital transformation, big buzzword. But the reality is the minute you begin on digital transformation, you increase the surface area for threat. And that was a reality for us in terms of now the exposure was higher. So it wasn't just the health insurance information, it was that now there was a lot more touch points. And think about it, it is the fingerprint you run in hospital, it is the data the hospital is going to send me, it is the medical reports that are going to be coming in, it is all of that with the integration with all of these third parties. And therefore for us, it's not something we can opt not to do, the minute you make a decision to go digital, then cyber really is part and parcel of that. And for us, it has three failure points. And we say, like any risk, three failure points: system, process, and people. And I think that has been touched on at different levels. So for system, of course, the infrastructure has to be there. We have Jack here, who's responsible for our SOC. And I am not a techie, but I understand red team and blue team. I understand all of those aspects, mostly because it really must exist. This technology has to be there. There's a lot of conversations to be had on why, as management and as executives, we must make investments. Just invest in technology. You cannot invest in technology without making deliberate investments in cyber infrastructure to protect what you've already done with regard to technology. The second failure point is process. And those aspects spoken to about governance. Is there data governance policies in place? Is there data classification? And we have the great aspect of today, our staff have to classify any email that goes out. So there is encryption. If it's, most people tell me it will bounce back. If it's not public, it will go out. If it's not confidential business partners, it will not go out. And I think these are very critical basics and so on. And then the last failure point is really about people. And people, for me, begins with what was said: fish really does rot from the head. It is great to speak about cyber, just like every other buzzword, but you have to demonstrate that you understand the importance of these investments, not just the technology infrastructure, but that you equip your people to be able to know how to use these things. And that's perhaps one of the areas that as Jubilee, I think we have done quite well. It is as simple as making sure, and I'll tell you, the team is quite interesting. We have phishing attacks, what are they called, simulated phishing attacks all the time. So you can imagine I can barely click on any link because I'm thinking, is this one of those they are trying to get me in? And it's interesting how over time you become a lot more aware. It is interesting that we will celebrate Cybersecurity Month. And now, as we're going through the holiday season, there will be deliberate awareness campaigns to let us know that during the holiday season, you're likely to see more and more of this. And therefore, this is the additional vigilance. So I think all of those failure points are important, and they really must be addressed at every touch point. The system, the infrastructure must be there, the investments must be made, technology, but cyber alongside it, but also the processes and making sure the relevant policies are in place. People understand what they need to do. But over and above that, I think there's also the deterrence today for most of our teams. And think about it, people will have their phones and they'll take a screenshot. I was just chatting with her, telling her yesterday, I saw Android. Is it just a newspaper that Android is easier? There's a lot of hacking. The Communication Authority of Kenya. It's Communication Authority of Kenya on yesterday's paper did highlight that there's more attempts on Android now. That keeps me awake at night because it means every other staff member in my team who has email on their phone, then accesses a medical report. There's a lot of things going through my head. Today we have a system, it is called Intune. You can see how fish is not rotting from the head here. So you cannot download that email because you cannot even open it and you cannot screenshot. And I think these are all very critical areas that an organization really must be aware of if they are going to look at the deliberate investment in technology. That cyber is not an if. Cyber is.
I don't think anyone could have said it better than you have, You clearly are grounded and very much in the flow of cybersecurity. So it's fantastic to see that. I think that's a wonderful transition here so that we can also see from Julian exactly, from a technical perspective, how we address these issues. You've been an advocate for cloud and application security. How do you see the role of cloud technologies evolving in Africa's cybersecurity landscape, and what unique challenges do they present for organizations in the region?
Thank you, Moses. First off, I know my title is a bit confusing. It was just, I think yesterday, my uncle was like, okay, what is this title of yours? Cloud security. How many of us are actually on the cloud? Maybe by show of hand. Do you have resources on the cloud? That's nice. It's good to know that it's more than just clouds. Yes, so with cloud, for instance, I think even by the show of hands, like you're moving more and more towards cloud-based solutions. And throughout the whole deployment of cloud solutions, we have what we call the cloud native security measures as well. By you deploying on the cloud, that doesn't mean that everything is secure. You as well have a stake in it. So we have what we call shared responsibility matrix. So for you who are deploying in the cloud, you also have a stake in securing your resources. What we've seen so many people rushing towards the cloud, but not deploying the security measures that need to be put in place. Because just because you've moved to the cloud doesn't mean that everything is now secure automatically. You have to make sure that whatever resources, whatever ports you have open are actually secure. What I always say is, for us, you have to be lucky throughout. An attacker has to be lucky only once to compromise your systems. And you know what these attackers want to come to do? They want to get access to your financial records. They want to get access to your company resources, the data, and sell it out there for financial gain. So with the introduction of cloud, yes, the threat landscape has increased exponentially, and it means that also for us, we have to put in a lot of measures to make sure that our resources are always secure in terms of data protection, in terms of access control, in terms of making sure that also zero-day vulnerabilities. We have, I like also what with the SOC. About 3 days of set up a very good SOC center here, down here. I used to be a SOC analyst, so it was very impressive just to see what they're doing in real time, making sure that whatever cloud-based solutions that are available for your customers are always secure. And you always have an eye, like if there's a real-time attack that's happening, they're able to do what's called incident response and triaging and making sure that whatever resources are being attacked are actually now secure. They're isolated, and then they make sure that it is secure.
So it's not just enough to move to the cloud, it's really making sure you're secure as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
If I may, Moses, also we see a movement from the critical infrastructures, utilities, and legacy system-based organizations moving to the cloud also, which in the past wasn't even something to think of. I mean, it was like a big no-no to move from legacy systems, the SCADA systems, or TCS systems to move to a cloud. This is something that no one thought was going to happen, and we see in the last few years those utilities moving with their legacy systems to the cloud, which expose those critical infrastructures to additional cyber attacks, which they didn't have before. That says we have to make sure that once you move to a cloud, you're also putting the 3 pillars in place: the policies and the procedures, the systems, the infrastructures, and the human factor with the relevant skills in place. So that's another trend, another movement that we see everywhere we go, and I believe also in Africa we'll see that.
Well, thanks so much for that contribution. You wanted to add something?
Yeah. So just to add, so like what was it, like 20 years ago, Microsoft actually introduced like the Trustworthy Compute initiative. So whatever products we're going to produce or we are producing, we always have security first mindset. So even for all of us here, like whatever resource we're going to produce, it has to come from top down, by the way. Security is a cost factor by itself. So it means that all of us, like, we have to put in the money to run to protect all our resources. It has to come from the top in order to invest in all those resources, because to say the truth, security products are expensive. True. And I think in most organizations, they see security departments as a cost center because they're not bringing in any revenue, right? And at the end of the day, like, that's the mentality that we need to sort of kill, because at the end of the day, we're actually protecting your millions of dollars, trillions of whatever amount of money that you have in your organization. So even if it's a cost center, we are always making sure that your finances are secure.
Great, thanks for that. Before I come back to you, Rosa, I think for me, I'd like to just maybe for myself, I'll put this question out. How does the average Kenyan or African SME deal with all the issues that we're discussing here, given that they're usually under-equipped, under-educated, and under-financed to ensure cybersecurity? And I'd just like you guys to just maybe think through that as we go through our second round of questions, because I think that's a huge issue as well in the marketplace. And I'd love to hear, some of your perspectives, maybe as you're answering your respective questions, but I think that's one of the areas where a lot of weak spots exist. So Rosa, as we come back, I think I'll bring you back to the regulatory question. The frameworks that are essential for enforcing cybersecurity standards, how effective are these in the African markets, and is there room for improvement?
Thank you, Moses. So the first thing I want to say before I talk about what the framework is as business owners and business leaders, we need to be very conscious that regulation is good, but regulation should only set a floor. That's the first thing. Before I get to tell you what the regulation should only set a floor to ensure compliance. And a lot of businesses in the room, just because of how global the world has become, our businesses transcend boundaries from our country boundaries and borders. And then we are also putting our information on clouds, which those clouds, when the first time in Tucson last week, where the cloud was, I thought he didn't mean the white cloud. He wanted to know where when we say they are on the cloud, where is it? I told him it's definitely not in Kenya. So the point is that the regulation sets ground or sets the floor of what it is that you should be trying to achieve. Why is it necessary or why is it important? It's critical because we've all understood from the discussions here that what your fellow stakeholder does for people who are operating in your business. I mean, Njeri can have all the infrastructure that she wants and all the security systems, but in the hospitals she's dealing with does not have the same sort of security systems. Then it becomes a zero-sum game because it's a link that will make sure that all the information she's protecting will actually then end up in the public forum. So regulation, while I've said that regulation is the lowest standard that we should be adopting in our organizations, regulation is key and critical because it ensures whoever it is you're dealing with also it has a standard that they're following, a baseline standard that we are all following. Now, there are 3 acts for those of us in Kenya that we need to be aware about to make sure that are critical in what we are doing. Our key act is the Kenya Information and Communications Act. A lot of people in this room, people like Safaricom, telco companies, ISP providers and all, what have you, all of them are regulated under the Kenya Information and Communications Act. So it's important to keep that in mind. The only issue is that act is 1998 Act. So you can imagine in terms of currency and being able to be a tool that can be used to set a good baseline for our country, it does have some deficiencies in terms of what it is trying to do. We also have a Cybercrimes Act 2018. Now, whilst it's 2018, like you had this regulation that came under it, which was the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act that also came in 2018. All these acts I'm talking about, and the last one is the Data Protection Act. All of them this year are being revised, and there are bills out to revise this legislation. Why? Because the cyberspace world is always evolving, and the communication channels and how we keep our information and technology, they're evolving every day. And so we can't afford to be regulated by acts that were created in 1998. Even 2018 is actually quite a cake. So the regulators are doing their piece in terms of ensuring that there's new legislation that is coming into place continually. Now, this Regulation 4 that we had about, I did want to speak about it very briefly, only because you may have had like the name sounded very long, but other than the name being very long, it actually has critical obligations for all of us in this room, because as long as you're in board or management of an organization, there are actually sanctions that have been put in the regulations if you're not adhering to the standard that has been set there. And some of them are very simple. Having a CISO officer in your organization is now mandatory. And I know you're thinking and trying to think, okay, who's our CSI? If you don't have one already, we have the regulators in the room, they're seated here at the front. So I will not ask you to put up your hand as to which of these already breaking the regulation in place. But it's something simple like that. Having systems in place, monitoring, reporting when you have a cyber attack are actually all now in our regulations as baseline, minimum standard that all of us in the room need to follow.
Does that apply to SMEs?
It applies to SME. It doesn't say the size of business if you are an ex The question that you're asking is actually very relevant. And this is where all of us as organizations need to then take up the opportunity to answer now your question, because that's what I wanted to segue into. So, we talk about, we have 120 lawyers. We're a big organization. We're the largest law firm in Eastern Central Africa doing corporate services. Now, in my profession, there are many law firms that have just maybe one lawyer, one partner. How do we expect that my organization and yet we need to make sure that all of them are adhering to our standard. And so thought leadership, I think, is very critical. What we are doing in our communities to make sure we are training. We would think about subjects such as sustainability. We know what we're not supposed to be doing and telling people about taking care of the environment and things like that. There's actually a lot more issues that we need to address and making sure it's permeating from our organizations, our big lofty organizations where we're sitting, and making sure it's permeating down to the common management. Yeah. And so the challenge in the room to all of us is, what are we doing in terms of thought leadership, in terms of making sure our ecosystems are compliant? I'm sure what Esther meant is that they call people from the whole ecosystem. So they didn't think about size of organizations or this big or that small, because the pesa shop that somebody goes to in my rural area in Rama is also a threat. It's part of a threat, but it's part of your ecosystem. So I think the responsibility for each of us is to make sure that our ecosystems, those people around us, are also quite aware and conversant with what it is in the.
Well, thank you so much for that. Lots of food for thought. Ofir, I'd like to come back to you. A lot of what you do at CyberGym focuses on real-world simulation training. And I was wondering whether you could maybe share some examples of how simulation training and AI tools prepare organizations in Africa for high-stakes cyber threats.
Sure. Let me start to explain a little bit what is so unique in the way that we train organizations. And last night I had a very nice dinner with my friends Willie and Babu, and we discussed a few topics. And one of the topics that we discussed was the UFC sport. We discussed about fighters and the leagues and everything. And I'm going to use that example just to explain about the concept of having a real experience, a real fight, real cybersecurity training. Imagine that you have a UFC fighter going into an arena, a boxing arena, without being trained before, without even being punched before, and stepping into the championship fight. Doesn't make any sense, right? And I'm sorry, I hope that the CISOs in the room will not be upset on me, but how many of you guys virtually been punched before stepping into your role as a CISO? Getting you the role, the responsibility to protect your organization against cyber attacks. The idea behind that is exactly what we are doing in CyberGym. And this is what the arena, the cyber arena here with Adili is all about. Getting those CISOs, getting those organizations, getting those executives and board members being punched, virtually of course, in the arena against real hackers based on real attacks, based on real technologies. So they will know how it feels like to be punched, how it feels like to be under attack before there being a real attack on their critical infrastructures and their organizations. Because most of the CISOs around the world, or the cybersecurity professionals around the world, are not being engaged, are being participated in a real cyber attack on real life network, real life infrastructures. So this is an essential purpose of all the concept of having training in cybersecurity training arenas like the one that we have here, because there are cyber schools, right? There are places that you can go and be educated on cybersecurity. You can be educated and get certified by Microsoft, by Cisco, by any other of the big vendors without actually getting to a fight. So that's the theoretical part. What about the actual facts, the actual experience of being punched in the cyber world? So this is the idea, this is the fundamental idea behind the concept of CyberGym, the cyber training arena here with Adili. Now, adding the new technologies, either the AI, the machine learning, the cloud, which is evolving every day and every month that we are talking about, and adding more and more technologies because you want to provide better services to your customers, much more advanced services to your customers, increasing we call it the attack surface because you want to increase the technology and the accessibility to your customers, to your services, and so on. That will increase significantly, and it doesn't matter, and I apologize for that, it doesn't matter how many regulations you're going to put in place. If you're not going to be training your organization, your employees, if you're not going to add more technologies, if you're not going to update the regulations and the policies and the procedures in the same pace that the technology is moving forward, it will be irrelevant. And answering your questions about the SMEs, yes, the SMEs has a lot of resources problems, but they have the same level of vulnerability, the same level of exposed to the same level of threats. That's why there are other suppliers like Adili providing CISO as a service, which probably will tick the box under regulations, or any other services that can be provided outside of the organizations rather than to put people and to put resources internally, which will be very heavily on their budget. But the last thing that I want to say regarding AI and machine learning, we don't have the full answer yet. It's an evolving technology, it's an evolving initiatives. Everyone is implementing that in a different way. We're still learning what is the AI means in a lot of aspects. So I don't think that someone has the full answer to give you how to combine that with the cyber threats and cyber defense methodologies that are out there. It's going to take a while. It's something that we are learning as we go. But the most important thing is that to make sure that everyone is in the same pace, on the same track, rather than left behind and ignoring the new technologies and the new trend.
Great stuff. Do you watch Netflix?
If I watch Netflix,
Yeah. So you know the big fight that's coming up. I noticed you use the metaphor of the fighting. So you know Mike Tyson is fighting Logan Paul.
Yes, actually it's tonight, I think. Okay.
Yeah, this weekend.
It's tonight, right?
So you're saying if I heard you correctly, it's almost like Logan Paul getting in the ring with Mike Tyson, and you get punched in the face. You have a plan, and then you get punched in the face.
I think Mike Tyson get punched in many times. That's why that event is actually happening. But yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So the main thing is you got to be ready. You got to train. You got to be ready for it.
At the end of the day, you have to get punched. It doesn't matter how many degrees you're gonna have, how many certifications you're gonna get. If you didn't get punched at least once, you have no idea what is coming at you. When it's going to be a cyber attack in your organization. I see Mickey smiling. And by the way, Mickey got punched a few times.
I think what is the key is before you go for the main game, come and get punched at the training arena so that you feel what it feels to be punched and what is it that you're going to do when the real punch actually comes.
Yeah, and I should have said that we're not going to knock you out in the arena. Okay, it's going to be politely and very gentle at the beginning. Not at the end, but at the beginning.
Okay, as an 80s teen, I tell you, my money is on Mike Tyson, so we'll see how that goes. Which is actually, yeah. So let's go back to you, Esther. And I think it's a perfect transition because you guys are, what's the word we like to use? Attack surfaces. Yeah, the threat landscape. You are a huge target, 30 million people, the amount of money you guys are making. So with the growth of this, I mean, what strategies are you using as Safaricom to adopt and also to protect customer data and prevent fraud?
So first of all, let me start with the arena or the gym. When I was first told that, you've been to the gym downstairs, I was like, I didn't see the weights, I didn't see the treadmill, I didn't understand, right? But understanding that what Adili is doing in terms of setting up a place where you can actually test these concepts, I think is really, really brilliant. One of the things that we do at Safaricom is actually do what we call what's an operational rehearsal. An operational rehearsal is we simulate different things that happen in our business. So you don't see us responding the way we do because we're great, but we actually do some practice. And so that's the part of what we have to do. So part of the operational rehearsal is we actually do simulate cyber attacks. What would we do when that happens? Who do you call? If all phones are down, where do you pick up? How do we make sure there's backup for our customers? It's a very, very powerful tool. And I'm so proud that, through the association we have today, that you can actually practice this from a cybersecurity or a good team in one area. So I think that's a very powerful thing. And so going back to the question that you asked initially around how do we support SMEs before getting to that. SMEs, and we know that SMEs usually their biggest constraint is working capital. They always need to find different sources of working capital to support what they do. And so their choice of partners and the people that they engage with becomes really critical. Because there are some things from a cybersecurity perspective. You can imagine it's a big space that you see downstairs, but it can also be very practical things that they can work with. We've talked about the cloud. They can do their backup on a cloud. They can buy some space on a cloud. If it's a Microsoft cloud, if it's one of the clouds that is reliable, dependable, and you can do the research, you can actually figure that out. One of the other things that we do, even your connectivity, from a fiber or from a mobile data point of view, is one of the things that we do need to think about. At Safaricom, we actually do, give packages where there is embedded cybersecurity within your fiber, within your data, so that we protect you. It's not always obvious. And I know when people are being pitched, they're like, no, we just want the connectivity. But no, we need a layer of security to make sure that you're completely taken care of. But this even happens in the space of home. When we got onto the Safaricom fiber and my teenage children couldn't get onto some sites, they came and complained. They were like, "Hey, mom, we can't get onto this site. We normally hack and get movies." I'm like, "Really? If you're hacking and getting movies, then maybe you shouldn't be." But that would never have been something that I picked out if I didn't choose the right fiber partner to work with, where we start to see what's good and what's bad. I'm also looking at the different setups of where you are at home, what you need to protect your equipment at home. What if you're in the office, how do you think about that? So SMEs, even though they may be, strapped for working capital, the choice of partners also really makes a big difference. And small things I keep telling people, which is, how many of you today have upgraded your, we always get these upgrades on our apps, on our phones. Let's upgrade to the next version. We're going to do an 18.2, 18.0, 18. That's a form of protecting yourself from cyber attacks. So don't ignore it, because those are things that actually keep them safe. And I believe that's how SMEs can also protect themselves. So what have we done at Safaricom to make sure that we're protecting all this data and making sure that that the organization is well taken care of? I think one of the first things is making sure we're certified. We have pressure tested our systems. So if you look at for example, the payment card industry standard that banks and card providers use, we made sure that we're certified and, in that space so that we can test our resilience in those spaces. From a data privacy point of view, which is a big topic of discussion, just given the size that Safaricom is, we actually do a lot to make sure we're adhering to the highest level of data protection standards, which can be tried and tested so that, you won't be able to work with a partner for whom you can't trust. And so that for us is a critical component of what we have to do, which is to make sure data is completely protected. The other thing that we do, which I spoke about a little bit earlier, is making sure that in every single step that we take, we are starting with security and safety first. So when we think about even the systems and the platforms that we have, are they modular? Are they multi-tenant? Yeah, so that if there's any issue, I can quickly move to a different location. So we have more than 3 different areas where we actually preserve and keep our data in different parts of the country. So if anything happens in Nairobi, I know you're still protected because I've got 3 other areas in the country that would perhaps not be affected by the same thing. So thinking about your resilience and how you have your backup is one of the things that we try and do extensively. On a quarterly basis, we also test these systems. Are they working? Let's make sure one's down. Let's pick another one up. How do we come up? How does that work? And that helps to make sure that our ecosystem is absolutely safe. We then ensure that we're working in the same way that we talked about SMEs, your choice of partners in terms of who you work with becomes really important. So working with the giants, speaking to the Microsofts of the world, speaking to the AWSs of the world, what can you do? Because they hold also bigger pools of data. How are they protecting it? How do we then engage with them to say, how do we take this then to the next level? These are some of the things that we're doing, constantly monitoring, 24/7. It's the same thing I saw downstairs in the SOC here. Never leaving anything to chance. You've got the technology. I can see you're leveraging AI. You're leveraging all types of technology, but nothing removes from that human eye, just making sure that everything is okay. So then the role of making sure that your people are well trained, equipped to identify and to spot the key challenges as and when they arise. So those are some of the things that we do to make sure that our customers' data, your data, is safe. We go to the gym, we practice, we see what can be done. When real situations come up, we're able to quickly then learn from that.
Well, thank you for that. Njeri, again, with cyber threats on the rise, what specific steps can insurance companies like Jubilee Health Insurance take to enhance data protection and build customer trust? And I think you've really emphasized the need for this data protection given the kind of sensitive data that you handle in your organization.
Come and get punched. So this is what, because as it's been spoken to, it's expensive. And the one thing that we discuss with it, especially in financial services, we're in the business of making money for shareholders. So any expense that takes away from their value will be questioned and will be a hard sell. We are fortunate that we probably have made quite some traction, but it is probably not as easy when you're beginning to convince your shareholders that we do need to make these investments and this is why they matter. And I had Dragon say, we're protecting your money. It's easier said than done. So in my view, I think to sell the agenda is where it begins. So you probably want an assessment, sort of see where you are, and then bring in the decision makers to get punched. And the reason why is then it's experiential and they get to appreciate what does that risk materializing look like, and therefore what needs to be put in place. And therefore the resources then become the second conversation. We're coming off a setup where just investments for technology have been a hard sell. And I say this because some of us in the room do technology and we think it's sort of obvious because it's a language you speak. But for everybody else, when you come and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, sort of thinking, it's another system. How much more does that cost? And it's always, we are ready to sort of say, is there another way that can be done? Then you come in and say, I need to make a cyber investment. And it's really not an easy conversation. The easiest way to do it is do an assessment. And then because you do need buy-in, and it's buying not because you just have invested in technology, but you do need the buy-in for you to be able to put in, to put in the training, to have the cost that enables you to put in whatever is required in place. For us, it has been a journey. And I can tell you at this point, yes, we have a board IT committee. The day-to-day, the monthly runs out. We have monthly reports on our cybersecurity environment, but there's also the infrastructure. We have a SOC. We are proud to say we have a CSIO. This is not a side conversation for our business, but I will say it's that our directors understand the impact of what this will look like. But it is not going to be the same for everyone. So the easiest way to sell the agenda, and I say this because it's the same thing for sustainability. We speak about sustainability as if it's CSR. These are hard things to sell. And to sell it, especially for as long as we are discussing for-profit organizations, we must start from the known to the unknown. And what is known, if it has an impact on wiping out everything we've already done, then that makes sense. And if that is simulated in a gym, then I think you don't need to sort of do 30 PowerPoint presentations over 5 years to sell the same agenda. And thereafter, then emphasizing why it's not just going to be the infrastructure, it's also going to be the training and the equipping and making sure everybody is able to do it. because every aspect, as we said, data protection is evolving. We've seen the data commissioner do some awards, especially some really steep ones. And when you put that in front of your board and sort of say, you do realize the implication of this, it could wipe out our entire revenue for this year. Now that's speaking from what they know to what you're sort of trying to put in. So I'd say bring them in, let them get punched. I think it's the easiest way to sort of sell and speak to every other thing and why it's absolutely critical.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think I cannot agree more. I mean, we had a few chances to train or to punch a few board members, highly respectable board members, and it was sometimes it was very impressive to see their reactions, their decisions, how they make the decisions based on what information and intelligence that they're getting. But sometimes it was embarrassing, to be honest, and we have a lot of shame of different actions that organizations did around the world. And one thing that I can that I remember there was a huge scenario that they wanted us to run an exercise on, not a top table exercise, a real exercise to see what will happen based on their decisions, what will be the outcomes, what will be the consequences of their decisions in their real systems, in the arena, but on their real technologies, and not just a piece of paper that you're passing through in the middle of a training, a top table exercise. And in a certain point, the chairman actually stopped. It was a huge bank, a European bank. The chairman stopped the training and said, listen, we are embarrassing ourselves. It's better to stop right now, get back home, did some work home, and go back after a few months and do the training all over again and see how good we are, or how did we do any improvement since the last training. So if you are a decent, respectable, and responsible board members or chairman of the board, I believe that you have to do those training based on the real scenarios and not just to tick the box on the regulators, but actually to do a real exercise and real training and to see what will happen based on your decisions and what will be the outcomes to your organizations on the revenues. By the way, everything goes back to the revenues, how much money we're going to lose, how much we're going to make, everything goes back to the same bottom line.
I agree. And just to add to that, increasingly back to the regulation, we're seeing regulation also beginning to put responsibility on individuals. The Insurance Amendment Act is now penalizing me as a principal officer, my board members, my senior leadership for not being deliberate about this mitigation. So I think it's the revenue, and then again, really thinking about yourself as an individual and your ability to do what you do.
So basically, it sounds to me like there's no room to hide, and you can't unsee it once you see it, right?
Which is why it has to be experiential.
Absolutely.
Avoided.
Okay, great. So we'll take the last question with Jolene. Jolene, your experience in DevSecOps with practical steps can help organizations to integrate security into their development workflows, especially as they adopt cloud solutions and agile practices. So how best can this be done?
So I don't know how many of us know of DevSecOps, or it's like that. I like it. Nice. So
Those are the ICT guys in the room.
and also, by the way, Esther, if you don't know, Safaricom was the first company to deploy the whole DevSecOps initiative back then, and I'm happy to see more and more companies actually putting DevSecOps initiatives. So DevSecOps is whereby you are adding automation of security throughout the software development lifecycle. So by the time you are designing that solution, you're putting security controls from the word go, from the design until the time it's in runtime. So when it's already in deployment, you have to make sure as well that you have security controls, always making sure that whatever you've deployed is always secure. And in the line of the analogy that you've been saying, so that you can have less punches in production, you have to make sure that at least you have these DevSecOps controls in place And because when you have this, you will have a lot less security vulnerabilities in production compared to when you are in development. So this is only in the case whereby we are developing solutions. I don't know how many of us have developers in our organizations. And yes, and I know most developers actually don't think of security as part of their responsibility. So that's why we have to change that perspective. Security is actually everyone's responsibility. Every one of us here, you have a stake in security in your organization. So I always say, like, for developers, they are actually our first line of defense because they know whenever they're doing the wrong things. It's just taking too much time maybe to do the right things, to put the right controls. So it's very important for us just to make sure, I know Esther also mentioned agile. So we are making sure that we have innovation at speed. So by this time, maybe you have to change this particular initiative. You have to deploy this particular functionality within maybe a week. You also have to do that at speed and not sacrificing security. So this is whereby you have to make sure that you have taken note of every particular aspect of your solution and securing each and every one of those. I'll give an example. So maybe you have VMs, you have containers, you have databases, you have APIs. You have to make sure that each and every one of them is actually secure. And you do that throughout the software development lifecycle through automation, because you have automated tools which you can integrate throughout your development workflow, and you get those security vulnerabilities even before they get into your production environment.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We're really out of time, but I think we might be able to take one or two questions from the audience. I don't know if we have a roaming mic here, but if there's anyone in the audience who'd like to ask the panelists a relevant question, we'd be more than delighted to take it. I see one there. Or maybe this one. I'll just take this. Cheers.
Good evening. All protocols observed. I think my question really would be more to Njeri and to Esther, but everybody can also still chime in. I'm Sylvia from MCOPA. I'm working in data privacy. I think one of the biggest challenges you now find is how do you balance the absolute right, and I'll say it in inverted quotes, of a data subject's rights that they can bring forth to a business vis-a-vis cybersecurity. So when you maybe see it's a cybersecurity threat that you're investigating, or even a potential money laundering threat, how do we balance the two? I think we've seen, as you mentioned, the ODPC is coming out and really showing that currently data subjects are winning. But how do we also now figure out practically how to balance providing information to customers and not compromising investigations? Yeah.
So who'd like to take this?
I'm happy to start because just given the amount of data we have, we're always in action data. So I think the best way to look at it and to find the right balance is you have to have the engagement with the client. You really do have to get them to understand what their data is going to be used for. I think that's the beginning. If you're honest around where the data is going to be used, and this is why a lot of these, and I know because we are involved in multiple, opting in, reading terms and conditions when you're getting into a service, we take that quite lightly as a consumer. But that gives the person who's providing the service, and I'll give you an example as in COPA, it actually, once they accept those terms and conditions, that they've shared their data with you and they've outlined how they're going to utilize their data, that gives MCOPA protection. But as a customer, you truly do need to be aware of how you're going to be sharing this information. So the first piece around that is educating customers around how their data is going to be used and potentially the risks that are associated with their data being used. And we should do that in an open and transparent way so that the customer then gets to choose whether they want to participate or they don't want to participate. And so that's one of the things that we definitely need to do. Now, in your space, particularly because we work through partnerships, right? You cannot deliver the tools, you can't deliver the brilliant phones that you're able to distribute. You need to do them through specific partnerships. It's then identifying with those partners, what are your boundaries? Yeah, what information can we share amongst each other? What information will we not share? And understanding that those are the boundaries in which you're going to then be working with in order for you to deliver the service that you've chosen to deliver for your customers. So those are some practical tools in terms of how you ensure that that is going, that you're able to deliver, so that you're not in breach of any of the acts that are in place right now. That simple act, and it sounds very simple, it may not be a complicated answer, but that gives both of you protections and that gives both of you awareness of what you're getting into, which then makes any form of dispute a lot easier.
And I think just to mention the obvious, making sure you get consent is very, very critical. Yeah, I know as a lawyer in the room, it sounds boring saying this, but robust contracting is really critical in data protection and in making sure you're managing third-party risks. Because like I said, a lot of it, you could do a robust job internally as an organization, making sure your employees are trained and everything. Then after you've done all that, a third party walks in with the risk. So third party contracting is very critical. Getting your consents from your customers, your end users, but also the people who you're dealing with, whether they're suppliers, whether they're your distributors. It's very critical to understand what is their policy and processes, how have they documented it, and how have you documented the relationship between you and them. Because that's one of the ways in which you can protect yourself from liability.
Go ahead, Njeri.
And one of that, I think often we discuss the what, you do need to comply, but then the biggest aspect is the how. And I find there's a lot of value in working with strategic resources that understand that how is something you can invent around. So it is making it easy for the client to understand. So whether it's going to be broken down, is it going to be done through technology? But if it's around investigations, I think even letting the data subject know that as long as it is something that relates to a criminal matter, then we are all law-abiding for client organizations. We need to infringe on the data subjects, right? Yes, but there's no way I'm going to hold the information. I'll provide it. I'll provide it for purposes of investigations. And that is clearly outlined in the consents that the client
Maybe we'll take one, maximum two more questions. I see two hands. The gentleman here in the forefront. And then I think we'll take the last question, the other hand that was at the back.
Thank you, Moses and the panelists. My name is Stevie Saboke, Malchus Group. So just mine is first a comment, generally, then we'll get a question to Esther from Safaricom. So really to congratulate Adili Group for obviously pioneering and this novel idea around this cyber trading, because I think the future is actually going to be online. Everything is shifting. Even you are one title deeds, everything is actually going online completely. So to pioneer, to actually start empowering and in fact increase knowledge, so people then know that space, people know how to navigate, is very important. So just to advise also that in addition to the knowledge Adili is doing, our experience, which is actually going to my question to Esther, is knowledge building and capacity building is one, then enforcement is the other, because you're building people to actually be empowered, but then how do you enforce when people are actually trying to break into that space? So working with the law enforcement agencies, working with the guys from OP and the rest, when the crime does happen, or in fact the time. So if Chris and your team can look at the loop, empowering training, but also crossing the loop with the enforcement, so that you close that loop. So my question to you, and I think could be partners with Safaricom, is around what you can mention the teenagers hacking in and watching movies, obviously piracy. So what I've seen in the other territories, in Europe, North American places. So for example, if you go in and actually hack into a movie online, you get a screen that comes from AIs that read and see you're actually hacking, not properly subscribed. They tell you UK police, this is a piracy site, it's criminal. They warn you straight. So that really can happen only the network operators like Safaricom, obviously work with the cybercrime enforcement, work together and deal AI and basically enforce. People start realizing, oh, someone is watching me doing this crime. What is Safaricom doing to actually start sort of that deterrence and warning people about that cybercrime? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question and the comments in that regard. And you're absolutely right. The enforcement, we can educate, but really education then becomes in the practical, in the doing. And in the doing is when you start to identify where the cracks start to come through, and that's when enforcement becomes really important. So what are we doing? We work very closely with enforcement agencies to understand what is going on in terms of what are they seeing, right? Because if we have to report anything, they're the team that works with us to ensure that we are reporting appropriately. So it's those partnerships. So there's an investment that's done by ourselves to say, we've seen this, we've seen the screens like what we see in the SOC, we're happy to work with them. But also on the other hand, it's also making sure that we're working with strategic partners in terms of, protecting our consumers when they're using our products. So that's already inbuilt. So I did talk about what we're doing from home. So you can't get into those sites. So that partnership with knowing which are the sites that which are the illegitimate sites that people should not be going to, and making sure that we've blocked some of those IPs to protect our customers and also to protect those who have invested. So I'm sure in the entertainment industry, it's an expensive thing. You create to create some revenue, but when someone gets that and not paying for it, that also presents a problem. So that's that's the second thing that we do in that regard. We also then we work with people like Adili also to see what else can you do. And we actually do from time to time run what we call bounty programs, where we go out there and we challenge and say, please hack. Try and see if you can hack. And it is true, because if you don't do that, you can't be the be all. And it's part of what we're talking about here, which is allowing yourself to get punched. So we do it in a controlled environment and we tell them try. And anyone who gets in, we have a little reward for you. And, that's how we test. And you have to be uncomfortable in this space. Cybersecurity is not a comfortable space. Getting into these areas, you expose your vulnerabilities, right? You work with people who you are afraid, well, are they going to judge me? Are they not? But you're better off experiencing that discomfort where you're getting people to test your systems than experience a loss of data, loss of revenue, loss of reputation. So those are some of the three things that we do to ensure that we're keeping our ecosystem very, very clean. And it's actually having conversations, going into spaces, we work with the likes of Netflix directly, we work with Spotify, we work with all the large data content providers, yourselves included, and we exchange information as we're then providing services or distributing our solutions to many others. So those are some of the things that we do in order to ensure that we're completely protected and that we're protected you as our partner and also as our customer.
I think we had one last question towards the back of the room. I don't know, I see two hands. Are they three? First, let's see, maybe we get one more in. Am I allowed to get one more in?
And as the answer, maybe I should add that there's a requirement actually to report when you have a cybersecurity incident. Yeah? It's a bit of a very funny thing because I use a very bad analogy. Remember how HIV/AIDS, when it came on, nobody wanted to, you don't want to say you have HIV or AIDS, yeah? And it was preventing treatment and all of that. We're having the same problem with cybersecurity at the same level. Nobody wants to tell people that we have been attacked. And now what that is making, what's happened is that the hackers are not getting caught because you solve your problem internally, cover it up, and then you run away. You don't say that this has happened to you. So the hackers are not getting caught. So I think we need to get over the line about reporting, cybersecurity reporting, cybersecurity crimes reporting, so that we can stop as many as you can. And I know as soon as you stop 110 others are born. But hopefully you increase you can stop like minor ones and also people who are doing things that are affecting our ecosystems.
And maybe to your response there, I assume everyone in the room, the organization is registered with ODPC, right? Is a data controller and data processor? Is everyone with the program? Presumably? Yeah, so I think that's one of the basic steps and also having a data protection officer as well, one of the basic steps. So I think we'll take the first question from the back.
Hi, my name is Noah from Phantom Technologies, a drone company. Ofir, you talked briefly about AI and machine learning, and a threat that is growing, that is here today. My question is about maybe a little bit of a future threat. When you look at companies like IBM and Intel that are working on quantum computing, and governments like China who are investing so much into it, and then you look at the larger banks like HSBC who have quantum computing cyber units to protect our data in the future, in the next 10 or so years. What are the things that kind of local companies like Safaricom that are doing to prepare us for maybe the future of this computing power, and do you feel it's a threat or not?
Well, I think it's a little bit complicated questions to answer, and I'll explain why. Quantum computer is still ongoing technology. It's being implemented in some countries. I had the privilege to see one. It's an amazing technology, and I don't think at the moment that, with respect to Safaricom and any other telecommunication company around the world, they don't have the full 100% solution to a cyber threat that can come out of quantum computers. And Entity Telco is one of our biggest customers in Japan. Entity Data, so yeah. And we had discussions with them about that, because also in Japan there is a race to get this quantum computer in place, in operational. So I don't think it's at the moment it's been balanced between the ones that wants to use it, let's say for good purposes. I'm not sure it's good purposes, but let's say for the sake of the argument that it's good purposes, and organizations that needs to protect themselves against bad usage of that kind of power, that kind of capabilities. To be honest, it's not balanced. It's far from being balanced. And again, it's the rest of the technologies, the rest of the bad guys against the good guys, and even the good guys which are developing new technologies. And if I understood you correctly, you are from the drone company. You guys also using a lot of AI as part of the softwares in the drones. And unfortunately, in the Middle East, we can see the same usage, different usage of the same technology for different purposes. The same goes to the other very advanced technologies. You can see it using it for good purposes, and you can see it using it for other purposes.
Let me just build on that to say that when you think about it, we're using it, we will of course want to use it for good. And some of the areas that we use it for is the same thing you're talking about. So we use AI in fraud detection. That's one of the mechanisms. So we're able to identify, if we see erratic behavior by a user at a time, at night, which is unusual, we can then send a signal to say things are not okay, right? And so that we use that for fraud detection. And all of this has really been enabled by AI and all the big data models that were built in the back, and how we're consuming and looking at our data. So that becomes a critical part in terms of how do we then deliver and protect our customers. Since we're talking about cybersecurity, that's one of the ways in which we can leverage this technology to keep our consumers, to keep our ecosystem safe. Another example in terms of where we can apply this is in the financial services space. So if you think about all the financial information that we have on individuals, we can actually start to make proposals around a credit score for you. to say you're good for this amount. So we're using that also in the space of creating viable credit scoring for individuals, which then gives them the ability to live their dreams, to access capital, to buy a premium when they can't afford to do so. When they go to the hospitals, how do they get treated? How do they maintain this information? All of that has really been powered by what we're seeing happening in AI. But at the same time, the risks that Ofir talks about are real. And so it's getting the right balance. I don't think there's a perfect answer for this question, but you asked how we're using it. That is how we're using it. We're using it to digitize, to make life simpler for our consumers, to provide relevant products for you. You don't have to see what Ofir is seeing if you're using an app. If I like gaming, allow me to see gaming. I'm not going to then show up, gardening equipment for you. It then makes your experience a lot better. But we have to be wary in terms of potentially what the downsides are. The downsides is exactly what Ofir has spoken about.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add, in terms of using quantum computing, like even at Microsoft, we use quantum computing for several of our cloud resources and also AI. So currently, I don't know if you've used Microsoft Copilot for security. So Copilot for security is just wild. One thing that you can take maybe to try as a particular incident, maybe that would take probably like 2 hours. Copilot for security actually queries for 7. So you can be able to just query, so which of the resources were actually affected by this particular malware, and then to give you that list. You see, you're actually using the power of AI to actually detect all these security vulnerabilities, like in real time and also like in machine learning speed. Yeah. So it's also up to us. Whenever we're building like AI resources, it's up to us as well to build them using responsible AI principles as much as possible, because at the end of the day, this is a tool that's actually learning from us. Yeah. So you have to believe that tool to help us.
This is so good. I don't want to stop. Njeri, I feel like you're itching to say something, given that, and I'm going to give you a little secret. I was hanging out at a beach in Diani about a year ago during the CIA conference with your ICT guys. And they told me that you guys are on point with AI. So I don't know that you want to share any, for the benefit of the audience again, how you're using AI as well.
Thank you. We use the biggest use case for AI in our business today is for claims adjudication. Today we have the advantage of being able to break down your hospital bill right down to the packaging that the hospital is able to do. And we're able to do comparisons with ICD-10, ICD-11, down to what dosage you should ideally have and what the hospital has prescribed, identify waste, and actually be able to tell the hospital that we're not paying for this because you have a billing for this, or this treatment protocol does not fit with whatever you have prescribed. And what's interesting is just over the last 2 years, we have seen about 50% growth in our business. But what is very interesting is that has actually been a reduction in cost. So we have not seen an increase in fixed cost. Immediately, we've seen a reduction, a lot of optimization. Typically, if I needed headcount just for do what I am doing right now, I simply need another 50 plus people just to adjudicate on a day-to-day. And what's very interesting is learning AI. So it's able to pick the trends, because hospitals to get cleverer and then doctors to get cleverer. So over time, and this is the one thing that I think most of us may not be aware of, I was really hit hard when I heard that how many of us took vitamin C and zinc on COVID time? Yeah, so the doctors told me that's not treatment for COVID. There's no treatment protocol. There's no evidence whatsoever that treats COVID. That was actually, if you felt better, it was psychological. That's absolutely insulting. Yeah, because you paid for it, and you paid for it with your insurance. And the thing is, over time, these questions of do you want vitamins with that? Do you want this with that? Then come up to your costs at the end of the period. And over time, your insurance cost just keeps getting higher and higher, and in no time, you can no longer afford to sustain that benefit, whether for yourself or for your organization. So we're using AI to help us at breakneck speed be able to really adjudicate claims. And if you look at it today, other than NHIF, we are the next largest payer for almost all providers within the country. So our traffic on a day-to-day basis is typically what you do on election day on a day. That is what we do every single day. And that is a crazy amount of inflow of data. So that's mostly on outpatient. We are now deploying it for inpatient. The waste saving, if you use a manual application that's a human being and there's human error, and if you use AI, there's almost a 30% saving on the cost. And you can imagine what that does to the client and what that does even to ourselves.
Fantastic. I think that's wonderful because, everyone's hearing about the hype of AI, and then there's the practical application of AI that we're seeing right here in the market, including the likes of the Jubilee and, of course, Safaricom and others. But I think I'll just have to stop it there. I believe we have a much bigger agenda ahead of us, the launch of this wonderful facility that is here with us today. And I think maybe the biggest takeaway I can take from here is, are there any marketers in the room? Do we know how many Ps exist? Is it 5, 6, 7?
Yes,
7, yeah. So I'm going to propose and posit that today we have 3 Ps. Yeah, maybe I'll get credit for this. I think the first P is people, right? The big takeaway here is that people underpin pretty much everything around cybersecurity. When all of you have talked to their areas of expertise, if the people don't have it, if they don't understand it, if they don't know what they don't know, it doesn't work. The second thing I think is platforms of technology. Yeah, if you don't have the technology, if you don't have the platforms that actually allow you to be secure from these cyber threats, then you can't get stuff done. And that's where I think, in particular, this arena really does play a big role in helping the people as well as having the right technology to do so. And maybe more importantly also is processes. If you're not documenting, if you're not setting up the right processes, then potentially you're again still vulnerable to the cyber threat. So I'd like to really thank our panelists for such a wonderful session. Please give them a hand.